When I was a young man in Hong Kong, I was known for my speed, my power, my technical precision. I could throw 5 punches in the blink of an eye. I could send men twice my size flying backward with a 1-inch punch. Everyone saw my external strength, but no one saw the internal battles I fought every single day. The battle against my own limitations. The battle against a world that constantly told me what I couldn't do, who I couldn't be. You know this battle, don't you? That war that rages inside you when you lie awake at night, questioning if you're good enough, strong enough, worthy enough to climb your mountain. Today, I'm going to show you not just how to fight this battle, but how to win it. Not by conquering your obstacles, but by embracing them, by transforming every barrier into a gateway, every setback into a setup, every wound into wisdom. I called my approach to martial arts Jeet Kune, the way of the intercepting fist, not to avoid life's difficulties, but to move through them with such purpose that they forge you into something unbreakable. The ancient Japanese art of Kintsugi repairs broken pottery with gold, creating something more beautiful than the original. Your obstacles, your failures, your moments of breaking, these are not your shame. They are your gold. They are what make you unique, valuable, irreplaceable. Think about the times in your life when you felt most defeated, the relationship that fell apart, the job you didn't get, the goal that seemed forever out of reach. What if those weren't failures at all? What if they were redirections? What if the universe wasn't punishing you, but preparing you? Every closed door forcing you to find an open window. Every rejection steering you toward what truly belongs to you. I remember when Hollywood rejected me because they said America wasn't ready for an Asian leading man. I could have seen this as proof that my dream was impossible. I had 2 choices in that moment: to see this as the end of my path or to recognize it as a fork in the road. An invitation to discover a new way forward. Those 6 months of physical limitation became the foundation of my philosophical awakening. Unable to train my body, I began to train my mind, an intensity I had never known before. I read thousands of pages on philosophy, psychology, and the mechanics of human movement. I analyzed every martial art form, questioning assumptions that had gone unchallenged for centuries. In my physical weakness, I discovered mental strength I never knew I possessed. When I finally returned to training, I was no longer the same fighter. I had shed the rigid forms and excessive movements. I had distilled combat to its essence. Hack away at the unessential became my mantra. My injury hadn't ended my journey, it had elevated it. The obstacle hadn't blocked my path, it had become my path. This is what I want for you, but what I'm about to share with you goes far beyond combat. This is Jeet Kune for your life, the art of intercepting the blows of doubt, fear, and limitation before they can knock you off your path. What I discovered through years of training, fighting, and living is that our greatest power doesn't come from avoiding obstacles. It comes from moving through them with such fluidity that they become part of our strength. Remember this: water can cut through rock not because of its strength, but because of its persistence. The rock doesn't defeat the water, it shapes it into something even more powerful. Your obstacles aren't your enemies, they're your teachers. And today, you're going to learn how to become a master student. The first time I truly understood this was after a devastating back injury that left me confined to bed for 6 months. The doctors told me I might never practice martial arts again. Can you imagine? Everything I had built my identity around suddenly stripped away. Instead, I returned to Hong Kong and created films on my own terms, films that eventually revolutionized cinema worldwide. The obstacle didn't end my dream, it refined it. The resistance didn't weaken my resolve, it strengthened it. Now, I want you to understand something crucial. Embracing your obstacles doesn't mean passively accepting limitation. It means actively engaging with resistance in a way that transforms it into momentum. It means developing what I call emotional content, the ability to infuse your actions with authentic power rather than desperate force. Let me tell you about emotional content. Many people confuse intensity with effectiveness. They think that the harder they push, the further they'll go. But true power doesn't come from tension, it comes from alignment. From being so connected to your purpose that your actions flow from a place of centered clarity rather than scattered anxiety. I once demonstrated this to a student who kept using muscle tension to try to generate power. I asked him to push against my extended hand with all his might. As he strained and struggled, I simply stepped aside, causing him to stumble forward. Then I showed him how, with proper alignment and emotional content, I could generate tremendous force without apparent effort. Be like water, I told him. Empty your mind, be formless, shapeless like water. This is the paradox that most people never grasp. Your greatest strength doesn't come from hardening yourself against life's challenges. It comes from developing such responsive fluidity that you can adapt to any circumstance without breaking. The oak tree that refuses to bend in the storm eventually snaps. The bamboo that yields without surrendering its ground not only survives but grows stronger. Think about water for a moment. It doesn't struggle against gravity, it flows with it. It doesn't try to smash through obstacles. It finds the path of least resistance around, under, or through them. Given enough time, water can carve canyons through mountains. This is the kind of power I want you to cultivate. Not the brittle strength of resistance, but the flowing strength of persistence. Now, let me be clear, this path isn't easy. The journey of transformation never is. There will be days when your obstacles seem insurmountable. Days when you want to surrender to limitation rather than push through to liberation. Days when the voice of doubt in your head is so loud it drowns out every other sound. These are the moments that define you. Not your moments of triumph, but your moments of choice, when continuing forward requires faith in what you cannot yet see. When I was developing my fighting style, I faced ridicule from traditional martial artists who couldn't understand why I was questioning centuries of established forms. There were nights I questioned myself, wondered if I was dismantling something sacred rather than creating something revolutionary. What kept me going was not certainty, but curiosity. Not knowing I was right, but being willing to be wrong in pursuit of growth. I had to be willing to look foolish in order to discover wisdom. I had to be willing to be misunderstood in order to express my authentic truth. This is the price of transformation, temporary discomfort for permanent expansion. You must be willing to pay this price, to stand in the fire of your challenges without being consumed by them, to face your fears not once, but daily, repeatedly, until they no longer recognize you as someone they can control, until you no longer recognize yourself as someone who can be controlled by fear. I developed an exercise that transformed my relationship with fear. Whenever I noticed myself avoiding something out of fear, I would write it down. Then I would deliberately move toward it in small, manageable steps, not to conquer it in one heroic bound, but to build a relationship with it, to understand its contours, its temperature, its true nature, rather than the monster my imagination had created. What I discovered was revolutionary. Fear is not a wall, but a door. On the other side of every fear lies a freedom you cannot imagine until you step through. The fear of failing keeps you trapped in mediocrity. The fear of rejection keeps you isolated from connection. The fear of inadequacy keeps you separated from your power. Each time you move toward your fear rather than away from it, you reclaim a piece of yourself that you had abandoned. You expand the territory of your courage. You transform the obstacle into the path. Now, let's talk about the 3 internal obstacles that keep most people from achieving their potential. Understanding these is crucial because external challenges are rarely what defeat us. It's our internal response to them that determines whether we rise or fall. The first obstacle is attachment to outcomes, to methods, to identity. When you become rigidly attached to how things should be, you lose the flexibility to work with what is. I spent years mastering traditional kung fu forms, only to realize that many of these movements were obsolete in actual combat. My attachment to tradition had become a limitation. Only when I was willing to question everything, to bite empty my cup of preconceptions, could I create something truly effective. What are you attached to that's holding you back? Perhaps it's an outdated self-image, a relationship that no longer serves your growth, or a goal that belongs to someone else's vision for your life rather than your own. Remember, to hold anything too tightly is to deform it. True mastery comes from holding your path with committed hands, but an open heart. The second internal obstacle is resistance to change, to discomfort, to uncertainty. Human beings are wired to seek comfort and avoid pain, but comfort is the enemy of growth. Every meaningful transformation requires a period of disorientation, as you shed old patterns and develop new capabilities. When you resist this natural discomfort, you stagnate. I remember training with weights attached to my limbs until my muscles screamed in protest. I remember practicing the same movement thousands of times until I could execute it without conscious thought. I remember pushing beyond what I believed possible, not because it was comfortable, but because I knew comfort would never lead to mastery. You must develop a friendship with discomfort, not because suffering has inherent value, but because the ability to remain centered in challenging circumstances is the foundation of an extraordinary life. The obstacle of resistance is overcome not by eliminating discomfort, but by expanding your capacity to move with purpose through it. The third, and perhaps most insidious internal obstacle, is fragmentation, the division of your energy through distraction, doubt, and competing priorities. A mind divided against itself cannot generate power. A heart pulled in multiple directions cannot sustain passion. A life without clear purpose becomes a series of reactions rather than creations. I discovered this truth when I wrote my famous quote, "When the successful warrior is the average man with laser-like focus." My physical abilities were important, but what truly separated me was my singular devotion to mastery. While others dabbled, I dedicated. While others divided their energy among many pursuits, I channeled mine into one transformative path. This doesn't mean narrowing your life to a single activity. It means finding the thread that unites all your activities into a coherent whole. For me, martial arts was never just about fighting. It was about honest self-expression, about becoming a living manifestation of my philosophy. Every punch, every kick, every movement was an extension of my core truth. This integration gave everything I did a quality that could not be imitated because it came from the unique essence of who I was. What is the thread that would unite your life into a powerful whole? What is the core truth that could inform everything from your career to your relationships to your health? Find this, and you transform fragmentation into focus. You overcome the internal obstacle that keeps most people operating at a fraction of their potential. Now, I want to share with you a daily practice I developed to transform obstacles into opportunities, to make the path through your challenges clear and navigable. This isn't about positive thinking or denying difficulties. It's about developing the mental and emotional tools to respond to life's challenges with creative power rather than habitual reaction. Each morning, before you engage with the world, take 5 minutes to identify your current obstacles. Write them down without judgment or elaboration. Just name them clearly. Perhaps it's a difficult conversation you need to have, a project that feels overwhelming, or an internal barrier like procrastination or self-doubt. Then, for each obstacle, ask yourself 3 questions. First, what is this obstacle trying to teach me? Every challenge contains a lesson, if you're willing to find it. Perhaps patience, persistence, creativity, or compassion. Perhaps the need to ask for help, to revise your approach, or to clarify your priorities. When you approach obstacles as teachers rather than tormentors, you extract wisdom from what would otherwise be wasted pain. Second, how can I use this obstacle to strengthen myself? Just as resistance training builds physical muscle, life's resistances can build mental and emotional muscle if you engage with them purposefully. Consider how overcoming this specific challenge will develop qualities you need for your larger mission. Will it build resilience, improve your communication, deepen your self-trust? See the obstacle as a custom-designed growth opportunity rather than a random interruption. Third and most important, how can I transform this obstacle into an advantage? This is where your creative power truly activates. Instead of simply overcoming the obstacle, how might you actually leverage it to move further than you could have without it? When Hollywood rejected me, I didn't just push through the obstacle, I used it to create a new path that ultimately brought my vision to the world more powerfully than if the initial doors had opened. This daily practice trains your mind to see obstacles differently, not as burdens to be endured, but as raw material to be transformed. Over time, you'll find yourself welcoming challenges that once would have defeated you, because you know they contain the seeds of your next evolution. Remember, the obstacle is the path, not something blocking your path, but the actual surface on which you walk toward your highest potential. The texture of that surface, sometimes smooth, sometimes jagged, is what gives you traction. Now, there's something important we need to discuss. The journey of transformation isn't linear. It spirals upward, often revisiting similar challenges at deeper levels. There will be days when you feel as though you've lost ground, when old fears resurface, when obstacles you thought you'd overcome again in new forms. This is not failure. This is not regression. This is life testing your learning, giving you opportunities to apply your wisdom at deeper levels. Each time you face a familiar challenge with new awareness, you're not going backward, you're going deeper. I experienced this in my own training. Just when I thought I'd mastered a technique, I'd discover a subtle imbalance that required me to essentially relearn it from the beginning. Each time this happened, I had a choice: to resent the renewed challenge or to welcome the opportunity for deeper mastery. The students who became true masters were those who welcomed the spiral, who understood that revisiting basics with advanced awareness is the path to exceptional skill. When you find yourself facing familiar obstacles, ask yourself, what's different this time? What do I know now that I didn't know before? How can I approach this challenge with greater subtlety, awareness, and inner alignment? The obstacle hasn't returned to defeat you, it's returned to initiate you into a new level of mastery. As we move toward the conclusion of our time together, I want to address the most fundamental question: why bother? Why embrace your obstacles rather than avoid them? Why transform your limitations rather than simply accept them? Why climb the mountain at all? The answer lies in what I discovered through my lifetime of training, fighting, teaching, and living. The quality of your life is not determined by the absence of challenges, but by your capacity to use everything as fuel for growth. The person who avoids obstacles may escape temporary pain, but they forfeit the opportunity to discover their true capabilities. They exist rather than live. They survive rather than thrive. But you, yes, you who have stayed with me through this journey, you were not born to merely exist. You were born to express something that has never existed before and will never exist again. Your unique combination of gifts, perspectives, experiences, and potential. One-time event in the universe. To shrink from your obstacles is to deny the world your singular contribution. When I developed my philosophy of Jeet Kune, I wasn't trying to create another style to compete with existing martial arts. I was trying to liberate people from the limitation of styles altogether, on using no way as way, having no limitation as limitation. This was my core teaching. Not a set of techniques to memorize, but a process of discovery to embody. This is what I offer you now. Not a formula for success, but an invitation to authentic living. Not a map, but a compass. Not answers, but more enlightened questions. The obstacles on your path are not punishment or bad luck, or evidence of your unworthiness. They are the raw material from which you will forge your greatest contributions. Every moment of resistance is an opportunity to develop fluidity. Every experience of failure is a chance to cultivate humility. Every encounter with your limitations is an invitation to transcend what you thought possible. This is the alchemy of the warrior heart, not to avoid life's lead, but to transform it into gold. I want you to imagine yourself at the end of your life, looking back on the path you've walked. Will you see a series of avoided challenges and comfortable compromises? Or will you see a magnificent journey of courage, growth, and transformation? Will you see someone who played it safe, or someone who used every obstacle as a step toward their highest expression? The choice is yours, not once, but daily. Not in some dramatic moment of heroism, but in the quiet decisions you make when no one is watching, in how you respond to disappointment, in whether you allow rejection to define you or refine you, in your willingness to begin again and again and again. Not despite your failures, but because of what they've taught you. Remember, water doesn't overcome the rock by force, but by persistence, by finding the path of least resistance, by adapting its form without compromising its essence. You don't need to fight your obstacles with tension and struggle. You need to meet them with such intelligent adaptability that they become part of your strength rather than detractors from it. The mountain you face may seem insurmountable now. The obstacles in your path may seem like barriers rather than gateways. But I promise you this: With each step you take toward, rather than away from your challenges, the path becomes clearer. The burden becomes lighter, not because the obstacles disappear, but because you develop the strength, wisdom, and flexibility to move through them with growing ease. This is the way of the warrior, not to seek an easy path, but to become equal to the difficult one. Not to eliminate obstacles, but to transform them into stepping stones. Not to avoid the fire, but to become so internally aligned that you can walk through it unburned. The obstacle is the path. Your limitations are your greatest teachers. Your challenges are your most powerful opportunities for growth. This is not just philosophy, this is practical wisdom for transforming everything that stands between you and your highest potential. Now, open your eyes. See the mountain before you, not as something blocking your way, but as your actual way forward. Feel your fears not as warnings to retreat, but as invitations to advance. Embrace your obstacles not as punishment, but as the precise training ground you need to become who you were born to be. Be water, my friend. Flow around, under, or through whatever stands in your path. Adapt without surrendering your essence. Persist without exhausting your energy. Transform limitation into liberation, not just once, but as a daily practice, a way of life, an art form all your own. The path awaits. Your obstacles are ready to become your advantages. Your limitations are prepared to become your teachers. All that remains is for you to take the first step, not away from what challenges you, but directly toward it. Remember, the obstacle is not something blocking your path. The obstacle is the path. And walking this path with courage, adaptability, and persistence will lead you to heights of fulfillment and contribution beyond what you can currently imagine. This is your journey. This is your time. The mountain is not your enemy, it's your opportunity. Not spite the obstacles, but because of them. Transform not in spite of your limitations, but through them. Be water, my friend, and discover that you are the ocean.